Welcome to the Wealth by Choice podcast. My name is Valerie Shira, and I'm a stay-at-home mom who turned entrepreneur. Each week, we bring you stories and wisdom from individuals who have broken the code to generating wealth. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Let's get started. All right, so today I have with me Jay Belacar. Jay is a business and technology leader with roots in the technology consulting area. Jay started investing in real estate in 2020 to diversify his investment portfolio. Although Jay was always interested in learning about and investing in real estate, he became passionate about real estate after doing his first few multifamily repositioning deals. After realizing true potential of real estate to create freedom of time, money, location, generational wealth, passive income, tax benefits, and positive impact on the society by providing people with the most basic needs of housing. Jay specializes in cash flowing commercial multifamily real estate, including sourcing investment-worthy deals, performing financial and physical due diligence, structuring partnerships, and asset management. Jay's firm, Compounding Capital Group, currently has 560 plus units in their portfolio in Ohio, Kentucky, South Carolina, and Alabama. Jay is passionate about networking, relationship building, self-development, ideation, and process improvement. Outside of work, Jay enjoys reading and exploring new places. Jay, it's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Valerie.
Tell me a little bit about how you got started in all this. Maybe a little bit about your background, where you come from, how you've kind of got started in all this.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Trying to keep it real high level here. My background, as you mentioned in that awesome intro, is in technology consulting, come from an engineering background, and recently got out of my W-2, but worked as a technology consultant for almost 10 years. And during that time, I was traveling a whole lot, serving different clients in different parts of the country. And to make use of the time that I was traveling and on the plane, I was just reading a bunch of books and ended up picking up a real estate investment book. And before that, it really started with, like for a lot of us, with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki book, and then Cash Flow Quadrant. So that really got me thinking that, as an employee, sure, you're making good enough money, but you're essentially running on treadmill and you're really not creating any equity in life. So if something happens, or if you want to retire a little early, you really don't have those options. If you have a medical condition and you want a nice stockpile set aside for your kids, a job's not going to offer you that. Building a business or building equity in something, in assets, is your only option. So that got me thinking, started reading a lot about real estate investing. And then everything I read, the tax benefits, the cash flows, the equity you're building, all of these benefits, for me, I was like, man, this is a no-brainer. Why is not everyone investing in real estate? And of course, it's a lot of work, and that's probably why not everyone is doing it, because managing real estate assets is almost like running a full-time business. It's not a hobby. But once I started realizing of the true potential of it, that's when we actually dove in. And my travel stopped during the COVID time. And that's when we actually bought our first commercial multifamily property. It was a lot of fun, a lot of learnings, a lot of mistakes made, but that's how you learn. And that first experience, we came out of the other end with positive cash flow, and the deal went fine. And that was a big encouragement to keep going and keep pushing. So just enjoyed the overall process end to end. Me and my wife, we both love real estate and we are both actively involved. So it was also something that we were able to do together as a couple. Otherwise, we are both stuck in our own rooms all day long in front of Zoom calls with our own employers and our own teams. So this was something to come together and do together as well.
I love that. Now, that's like a completely different, a whole life shift right there for you. Like, okay, so you're traveling. Did somebody refer the book to you? How did you get onto Rich Dad, Poor Dad? That's like that's the Bible of getting into real estate. Everybody reads that book and it changes them. Did somebody refer that to you?
Yeah, no, actually, I had read this book back in high school. So at the time, it had still made a lot of sense to me back then,
Okay.
but I had not seen the real world. And after all of that time, I remember listening to, I think, one of the Bigger Pockets podcasts, and somebody said for them it all started with Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was like, man, I remember reading that book back in high school, but I barely remember anything about that book. So I was like, let me refresh my knowledge. So I picked it up again and started going through it again. And I was like, man, this makes so much sense, because a lot of times when you go to college, graduate from school, get a best possible job, kind of become doctor, lawyer, or engineer, or, things that your family tells are good things to do. And you almost start to follow that mold or status quo. You tend to forget some of these other learnings that you've had through books and all that. And I was like, man, I got to refresh my knowledge. And that was, again, another aha moment for me that, oh, I got to do, even if I'm going to keep my job, I got to do something on my side where I'm building something from my family long term, which is gonna stay even after I'm gone. It's
Yeah, that
somewhat of
makes
a
sense.
legacy.
You
So
saying that makes me think back to, I don't remember where I heard it, but it's something, I don't remember if it was probably one of the books, like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it really hit me, and I thought that is so true, because so many times, like, I'm learning things and I'm trying to tell people, I'm like, oh look, I just learned this, and so many times it does not go over well. Not that it's bad, but they're just not ready. They don't need that right then. They're in a different place. And the same with me. People tell me things and it just doesn't click for whatever reason. And then, a year or two later, I discover it again. And I'm like, oh my goodness, why didn't I do this back then? And I wasn't there yet. I was not ready. So that's kind of what made me, what made me think of that when you're saying that.
absolutely, no, agree with you 100%. Because I think mentally, once you're ready and you know what you want to pursue, then you also start going into the right circles, and your chances of finding the right teachers and mentors improve significantly,
Yeah.
because you start to take action. And you only start to take action when you found something that you really want to do and you feel really passionate about. Just because someone tells you that, oh, this is the next big thing, I was doing cybersecurity work, so very hot profession. There's a lot of cybersecurity jobs, but with real estate, for some reason, I just connected and felt so passionate, and things just started to fall in place, and including finding the right teams and mentors like our MIH group and Jake and Gino network. This all happened because I was gravitating towards these types of people. So I totally agree with
Yeah, and
exactly what you said
it
there.
goes back to Napoleon Hill. It all starts with the desire. If you don't have the desire, you can't
Absolutely.
kind of steer yourself in those directions or even find those people. And a lot of times, I think
Yep.
you want to change. Like, I've been in the place where I'm frustrated with my situation, but I still don't have that desire to change. Like, I don't realize it. It's just I'm unhappy, and I complain about the situation. I'm frustrated, but until that frustration or unhappiness changes and into a spark, an actual desire to change, it doesn't do anything except push you maybe even further in a negative mindset and frustration with your situation. So yeah, getting that desire is definitely the first step.
Absolutely. And you touched upon desire to change and mindset, and it really starts there. And it's huge, because I think most people, unfortunately, today spend most of their time on social media just browsing, looking at pictures, and really doing things that does not require a lot of thinking, and you're just killing time. But I feel frustrated a lot of times that I want to do all of these things and I'm barely able to do even 10% of it. But even 10% is actually a win. So I have to sometimes remind myself and also speak with people who have that attitude that, hey, even if you can get 10% of what you've set your sights on, it's still progress, rather than doing nothing and just wasting your time watching TV shows, movies, or browsing meaninglessly on social media. So I think it does sometimes drive your anxiety levels up, because you're like, oh, everyone around you is doing so much and you also want to do all of those things. But I think as long as you're continuing to connect with the right people, hanging out with the right crowds, and doing some reading or something to improve yourself, listening to podcasts, all of that has an impact. And I think for me, at least, that has played the biggest role, is just reading a little bit of, like, I'm not a voracious reader. I read maybe half an hour to an hour every day. just maybe about 20 pages a day. But even that, one or two good ideas that you pick up get you charged up for the next day. And you just need those small doses of motivation to keep going, right? So it's I think desire to change, mindset, and being around right people has been
Yeah,
a
I
game
just
changer.
kind of think of
Absolutely.
how, like, before we really got started into this whole change, and as far as with our lives, I would compare to myself kind of to those behind me, like, well, we're pretty good. We've got, our bills taken care of. We've got, a little bit, we were doing like the Dave Ramsey stuff. So we're, getting out of debt. I just felt like, hey, we're good. We're better than,
Yep.
a lot of people behind us. But when I switched that night, we got into these groups and we're talking high achievers, motivated people. I was like, oh my word, we're not even started yet. Like it can be a little bit
Yeah.
like daunting. But it's like what I really did was I shifted and I look
Yeah.
at those in front of me as inspiration and drive. But then I look at myself, 6 months
Yeah.
ago or a year ago for an encouragement, because you do have to kind of balance it out, or it can be extremely overwhelming when you're with people who are just
Absolutely.
crushing, life way up ahead, and it can be a little overwhelming.
Yes. No, that's another very important point that you bring up, Valerie, because a lot of times when you're surrounded by people who are always going for more, that's great for personal development and growth. But a lot of times you can lose sight of all the things that you're grateful of for, right? I mean, all the things that you have in life. So I think it is important to also look at people who barely have anything and be appreciative of all the things that you have that most people in the world don't have. So I usually spend maybe 40% of my time in that zone is being grateful for what we have, because if we don't, then we'll always be anxious and overwhelmed and always want to do more and really unhappy no matter how much you're accomplishing. And then the 60% of time is okay, looking at what people above me are doing and how can I get better, right? Because I think it is definitely a fine balance, and I've been guilty of living in that space where I was just blaming myself for not doing enough for over almost 2 years. But especially this year and second half of last year, we're like, hey, we are not in a race. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So let's take it slow. Let's make sure that we are focusing on building true relationships, and we are happy what we are doing rather than just close another deal and just run behind one deal after the next when you're actually not happy, right? So that was a very big decision for us, that hey, let's slow down and let's be happy and enjoy the process than just
Yeah, that
chasing
makes
goal
sense.
after goal.
Well, let's talk about one of your first real estate
Yeah.
deals. Like, so you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, you start going down that whole rabbit hole, and you start getting into real
Yeah.
estate. What did it look like in the beginning?
It was honestly overwhelming, but the first deal we did was, I would say, not too small, but small enough, where me and my wife, with the capital we had, we were able to comfortably take down. So I think one of the biggest mistake that people make when they do their first flip or first reposition deal is they try to bite on more than they can chew, and then they run out of capital, and then they are forced to sell, oftentimes for cheaper than what they paid for the property. In our case, we made a lot of mistakes too. It was an 8 unit apartment building, technically two 4 unit buildings right next to each other. So up to four families considered residential, and 5 units and up is commercial multifamily. And if you have no experience in commercial multifamily, it's very difficult to get loans for commercial multifamily deals. So being our first deal, that's why we wanted to do multifamily from the get-go. After reading a lot of books and listening to podcasts, it was clear to us that multifamily offers some benefits over single family homes. Just really it comes down to economies of scale. But at the same time, we didn't have commercial experience, so we bought these two four families right next to each other. And one thing that we did right was the location. This property was in a Class A location that's always high demand, right off of the highway and right near a massive shopping mall. It's one of the best shopping malls here in Cincinnati. So we knew that going in, the location was solid, but the asset was severely distressed,
Wow.
like partial reconstruction, framing damage, termite damage. We had to change all the plumbing, all the electrical, and all the exterior work as well. There was a lot of old garages on the property that we had to tear down. So essentially, we had to do a lot of work, and it was way more than what we had initially anticipated. My initial rehab budget was about 70K, and we ended up
Wow.
spending 3 times as much. But the good thing was we had decent enough liquidity and also a HELOC against our primary residence. So we were able to tap into those pots to complete the project. And after completion of the project, I still wasn't 100% confident. Hey, are we going to cash flow? Can we do a cash out refi to pull all the cash out? But because the location was great, we were actually able to get rents $200 more
Wow.
than my pro forma rents, and we were able to actually make up for the extra money that we had to spend. And there's not the learnings from your first property is it's not just from your budgeting mistakes or things turning out to be more expensive than you thought, but a lot of times you don't know that these things have to be done when you're starting out. And once you start opening the walls, or we fixed up all the interiors and we were not getting any traction because from the outside the property still looked pathetic. So the curb appeal, you got to improve that too. It's all the pieces have to come together, and then the management side of it. So we still self-manage the property. We started managing it, one, to keep our cash flows high, but also to learn property management as a business. That way, now that we are outsourcing property management, we know what type of questions to ask and what type of reports to look at on an ongoing basis. So all of these were really the learnings that came up from our first project. It was about an 8-month project end to end for stabilization. And although I was working full time at the time, I was actually working from the construction site every day. So I would go there in the morning, work out of my truck, and
Wow.
then come back in the evening because it was a brand new team, brand new set of contractors I was working with. So there was no trust relationship there. And unfortunately, at least in my market, and I think it's in general also it's true, that when you try to work with investor friendly contractors who are reasonably priced, they don't always have the best Angie's List reviews and Google reviews. So you don't know how trustworthy these guys are going to be
Sure.
unless you start working with them. So that initial time before you make your team and put the team together, it's been a lot of heartache, stress, and being on site every single day. But after that, it's gotten easier as we've built out our teams of contractors, property managers, lenders, attorneys, CPAs. Now most of the things fall in place whenever we do a deal.
And
So yeah,
yeah, that
those
kind of
those
goes.
were
I
the
mean,
main
anything you
learnings.
start, you've got that slow. You don't feel like you're going anywhere for a long time, and then once you hit that curve in the line and you start to actually go up, you feel that velocity of the compounding effect of everything that you've been putting in, the relationships that you've been building, and the people you've been contacting. So that's when it starts to really get exciting. Now, like with your family,
Absolutely.
what did they think about you getting into real estate? You said your wife was supportive. Was that kind of a new concept for them too, or do you have kind of background with real estate?
That's a good question. So, of course, transitioning to real estate full time was a difficult pill to swallow for my parents because I spent, 6 years going through undergrad and grad school, learning a certain, or getting a certain specialty in engineering. And those are also pretty hot fields. The jobs are plentiful and they're high paying jobs. So, and it's a pretty
Sure.
safe profession to be in, right? So, in their minds, I was leaving something that was safe and secure and going after something that was very uncertain, very market cycle dependent. So, it was definitely a challenge. I think my wife saw the potential in it because when we went through the education journey, she was a part of it too. So she understood why I was doing it, and she also works. So at least we have one stable income coming in that kind of pays the bills, and that's how I'm getting good health insurance. So that way we are able to also kind of
Okay.
somewhat manage the risk, right? And over time, I think my parents also understood now that they are seeing what I'm doing. And my dad has been a real estate investor himself back in India, which is where I'm from. And although the market in India is very different from the US, it's more like you can compare it with like New York City or California markets where it's not really about cash flow, but it's more about appreciation. But all through these years, last 10 years that he's been investing, now the properties have appreciated enough to the point where he's able to live off of them
Wow,
in
that's
his
awesome.
post-retirement life. In the US, you can scale a lot faster because there's much better loan products, and the leverage is a lot higher. So it's actually an even better market to invest in real estate, and that's why real estate makes even more sense here in the US, where it's open free market, an open economy, and the debt is cheap, which no longer is true. It's getting pretty expensive now, but the interest rates usually come back down. In the last 9 or 10 times Feds have done that. So for all of those reasons, I was pursuing real estate, and over time, the family kind of got why what I was doing and why I was doing
Yeah,
it.
that makes
So.
sense. Now, I know that you're starting another business, like a painting business. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about that, and we could talk about how that fits into kind of the big picture and your big plan as far as your finances.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I still want to mainly focus on the real estate. And then what happened was usually in real estate, we realized that you're usually equity rich and cash poor all the time. And if you're doing your deals, your investors are always going to ask that, hey, how much are you investing in this deal? Because they want to know if you have your own skin in the game, right? But then you invest 25, 50K in each one of these deals, very quickly, you're out of capital again. So you need something to to replenish that capital on an ongoing basis. And cash flow is good, but cash flow doesn't really replenish your capital at a very fast pace. It's a pretty slow trickle. And over a long time, when you've already built a multi-million-dollar portfolio, then the cash flow is enough to earn you a six-figure income, and you can live comfortably off of the cash flow. But initially, when you're starting out, the cash flow is fairly minimal. You can barely pay the bills with that. So that was kind of the challenge that we were facing, and we saw that a lot of other real estate investors starting out were facing a similar challenge, and that challenge was keeping them in their jobs longer. And I realized that I had come to a point where I was either doing injustice to my investors or to my employer, because time is the only limited resource. So, I didn't want to get fired, and I wanted to leave on good terms. So I was like, okay, this is the time. I cannot spend 10 hours a day with my W 2 employer anymore, because we have a lot of deals that are being repositioned. So I wanted to get out of my W 2. But at the same time, I wanted to create another cash engine, if you will, to fund our real estate journey, and also to fund the daily expenses over time, right? And having multiple streams of income is always a good idea. That way, you don't have all of your eggs in one basket. And with that, all of that in mind, we started exploring franchise opportunities. So we looked at maybe 10 different franchise options. And why franchisees? Because they already give you systems and processes that they have built, marketing processes, finances, bookkeeping, accounting, things that already work, and a client base that's already in place. If you start your any other business from scratch, it's going to be 3 to 5 years of pain. If you start a franchise business, it's usually 1 year of pain, and after that, you start cash flowing positively. So, with all of that in mind, of course, you lose some amount of money in royalty fees, but it was a good place for us to start, go with something that was tried and tested. And then the company that we ended up going with was a painting company, as you said, and that was mainly because it also somewhat relates to real estate. We paint all of our assets. We buy distressed properties, so we can use some of that work on our own assets on the real estate side. But also, we are meeting the same type of people to expand both businesses, which is real estate agents, wholesalers, flippers, investors. So I don't have to create a whole different networking channel for this other business. I can work my same network that I'm anyways talking to build this business as well. So with all of that in mind, we started this
And that is so
franchise
important.
business.
I love that you hit on that. Is building a business kind of within the wheelhouse of real estate or whatever you're trying to do, because they complement each other. I mean, if they don't, you're really dividing your time and you're dividing your focus, and you're going to make it hard for yourself if they aren't. And that's really what we were thinking as far as with the virtual assistant agency that we're doing. Very similar. We're meeting the same people because we serve a lot of
Yep.
real estate investors and a lot of people who are building businesses, and it's just kind of really ties together. So I love that you brought that up, and it's something to really keep in mind. Are you really have two choices. Are you going to try and get either a high paying job and just keep putting money in, or are you going to build some type of business that's going to help fund it? Because you're right on. The real estate is a long-term play, and building that cash flow up, it does take time. And in the meantime, you got to live on something. So I
Right.
love that plan. Now, how does that,
Yep.
what's your time frame? How's that kind of look in the long run? Are you looking to just eventually build and sell a business, or just kind of get it there for the cash flow to put into real estate? How does that fit in as a whole?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think eventually we might sell the business. So the franchise agreements
Okay.
usually are about 10-year agreements. So, but you can always sell the business before that. So we will see how the business is going, and maybe at the end of 5 to 7 years, if the real estate business is providing enough cash flow where we don't really need the other business, I might divest my share, or we may
Sure.
sell the business completely. And when I say divest my share, because I have a partner, equity partner on this business, and he already runs a painting company. So I think in real estate as well, we always talk about partnerships and how important they are. Same thing here on the franchise business. I did not know anything about painting. I came from a technology background. So having to learn that and trying to compete with others in the marketplace who've been doing it for 20 years would have been incredibly difficult. They already have their reputation. So I partnered with a person who I know fairly well now. He's done a lot of our projects, very hardworking guy and a trustworthy person. And he's been running his own painting business for the last 10 years. He already has his crew. That way, I don't have to worry about the operations side. So he'll be our operations lead, doing all the field work, while I'll be mainly working on marketing and finances. And that way, we can split our responsibilities. And that way, I can still have some time set aside for real estate. I think the first year is going to be pretty challenging. Building any business is crazy difficult. I'm pretty sure there are going to be instances where I'm going to feel I wish I would have kept my W-2, but that's just the nature of the beast. So after 1 to 2 years, once you've built it and it starts to cash flow, then you can decide, hey, maybe after year 4 or 5, do we want to sell the business? And that's another benefit of building a business, because you've built equity in it and you can sell it for hopefully much more than what you paid to buy the business, because you built a cash flow stream, if you will. But if the business is going well, and if we are able to create a good team where I don't have to spend too much of my time, because initially I would be doing sales consultations, eventually I would hire a sales guy, right? And if I have to spend maybe 2 hours a day, I don't think it's a bad idea to even have those multiple businesses. That way you're not, again, overly reliant on just one asset
Yeah,
class
yeah,
or
that
one
makes a lot of
business.
sense. Yeah, like going back to you saying about reading different books, is there any other one that really stands out other than like The Rich Dad Poor Dad, as far as either real estate or just personal development in general?
Yeah, I think on the personal development side, I like a lot of these Dan Sullivan books, Who Not How, which is right behind you there, and The Gap and the Gain from the same author. Phenomenal book. I think it really opened my eyes. And I've always struggled with delegation, and those books were really game changers for me. And also some Gino Wickman books like Traction, EOS. They are more tangible. Like, what can you do to put in processes in place for your business so that you can scale your business, and how do you put the right people in the right seats? There's another book called Rocket Fuel by the same author, Gino Wickman, and he talks about integrators and essentially visionaries. So visionaries are leaders who have a million different ideas, but the ideas have to convert it, you have to convert them into reality, and the integrators can pull the teams together who can execute on those ideas. So these books, I think, for all entrepreneurs are just phenomenal. And then from a mindset standpoint, I think and Grow Rich is just phenomenal. I mean, it's an old book, but it's
Yeah.
stood the test of time. It's a fantastic book. I think from a mindset standpoint, that's really the first
Yeah.
book anyone
Now,
should pick up.
this is kind of a different question, but like you talked about a lot of different decisions you've made, big decisions, small decisions, all those things that are constantly coming up. Do you have like a, I don't want to say formula, but how do you make decisions? Because that's a hard thing for some people to do, is to decide, what do you like, weigh the pros and cons? Do you look 5 years out? How do you base your decision making?
That's a good question, actually. And I know a lot of people struggle with that. Actually, my wife, she's not a quick decision maker. She takes forever. The smallest decisions, like what you want to eat at the restaurant. But on the flip side, I think sometimes I actually end up making decisions too quickly. So I think in that way, so always any major decisions you make as a family or a business, it's just best to talk to your friends and family. So that's the first thing I do. Talk to my wife, because she can always see all the things that could potentially go wrong and what are the risks and why you need to think about this and give it a second thought. And I always think about everything that can go right, right? So I think collectively we are able to come to a good decision making process where we get a realistic view of what to expect. On top of that, I think the pros and cons approach is what I usually like. So, for example, just considering the decision making process about this franchise business. So, I actually spoke with other franchisees in the system and also franchisees who had failed. About 4 different franchisees who had gotten out of the system. And I got their perspective too, that, hey, was it the company that's not that good? Is it the product? Is it something on your personal side that kind of impeded you from growing your business? What is it? And from everybody I heard, it's not the company or the product. It was mostly their personal issues, or they thought it was going to be a little easier, but it was way too much time consuming. So having those different perspectives from different people, and then also different things like, hey, is it a complementary business to what we are already doing? But I think the most important question really is this something you're going to enjoy doing? Because there could be other businesses, medical profession is very lucrative. There are many franchises in that area as well. But I don't think that's an area that I enjoy. I enjoy renovations and real estate. So you need to feel passionate about anything you're doing. And then by the end of the day, after you've looked at all of these different aspects, pros and cons, I usually just jump in and take the decision and see how it all works out. I think a lot of people get stuck in analysis paralysis. So having a friend who can push you and, hey man, just take that decision is always helpful. So I've never struggled with analysis paralysis. Sometimes I actually take decisions a little too quickly. So, but I think the process is same for everyone, right? You just look at the pros and cons, but talk to a lot of people, referrals, people who have done this before. I think that gives you the most clear view, because the people who are selling you the product or selling you the business, they're always going to paint the rosy picture. But if you talk to people who have been doing it, I think that's the best type of intel that you
That's
can get
amazing.
for
That's
decision
good
making.
advice. I appreciate that. Talk to people who have not succeeded, because I mean, that's a huge amount of
Yep.
valuable information that you can really put into that piece. That's fantastic. Now, my last question for you today is, what do you think are some common things that stop people from success? And it's kind of going along with what you said. A lot of times we see the successful people, we see, yeah, do this, this, and this, but we don't realize we're actually doing the other things that are stopping us. So are there any things that maybe just immediately come to your mind that really stop people from success?
Yeah, I would say quite a few things, but I think the couple things that kind of come to my mind, first and foremost, is just not being willing to work on your mindset and your skill sets. Just wasting time, because I mean, money sure is a important resource, but time is your most important resource, and wasting time is the biggest mistake. I wasted time back in my college days playing video games, and I wish, I see a lot of college kids these days who are 21, 22, fresh out of college, and they've already built a business. And I was like, man, I wish I was doing that when I was in college
Sure.
over playing video games, right? So I think it's all about time, and that really gives you an edge over other people who are perhaps starting late, is really time. So make use of your time, work on the mindset. I think fitness levels and mental and physical fitness both is extremely important. I'm not the best at it, but I do recognize that it's a crucial component. And the longer you keep ignoring it, the more toll it's going to take on your personal health, life, and finally productivity and your business. It all translates down to your financial success. So I think that's perhaps the biggest mistake that people make. And when you're not mentally, physically fit, and you're not investing time in really learning and getting better, you also end up procrastinating a lot. So you're just, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, because you're not in the best physical or mental health to actually start taking that action. And then lastly, just being in the right crowds, because the people you hang out with have a huge impact on your mindset, on your goals, on your focus. So if you're hanging out with successful people, and if you're the stupidest guy in the room, I think that should be the goal. Be the dumbest person in the room, because that's how you know that you're improving and you're growing, because you're hanging out with the right people. So I think those are the main points. Those are the main mistakes. But also, I think lack of focus, or trying to focus on too many things at once. The shiny object syndrome, as many people call it. It's very real, and I personally struggle with it a lot. And I still question myself: is this franchise opportunity? Is it actually, is it shiny object syndrome, or is it actually a good idea? So I asked myself that question many times before actually I took the plunge. And I spoke with people like Vince Gethings, who also runs a franchise besides his real estate business, and saw that he was doing well. So I know that it's possible to do it. It's achievable. But you got to talk to people and make sure that you're not trying to focus on too many priorities at the same time, because then nothing really gets done when you're trying to work on 10 different things. So I think those two are probably biggest reasons for failure,
Well, that's a
at least for
lot.
me.
That's a lot of fantastic stuff to really look at and think about in your life, and just decision making, all that. A lot of valuable information. Well, Jay, I really appreciate you getting on with me today, taking time out of your busy schedule just to share the stuff that you have learned, the journey that you're on, and a lot of the choices that you have made that have really helped put you where you are today. Is there any specific way that the listeners can get a hold of you if they want to reach out and maybe get to know you better?
I think the easiest way is Facebook. My first name, my legal name is actually Jaideep, Jaideep, and last name is Balekar, which is Balekar. They can reach out to me on Facebook. I'm pretty quick in responding on Facebook. Pretty active on LinkedIn as well, but takes me a day or two to get back on LinkedIn. And also our website. So if anyone reaches out to us via our website, the information automatically goes to our calendars, to our overall contacts roster. So we are also very quick in responding to any incoming requests we get through our website, which is www.compoundingcapitalgroup.com. So that's compounding with an ing, capitalgroup.com.
All right. Well, sounds great. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for being with us today, and I hope you have a fantastic week.
Thank you so much for having me, Valerie. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. So it was really awesome to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you took the time to invest in yourself and to learn with me today. If you're interested in joining a group of like-minded people, I want to personally invite you to our free networking group where you can make connections and build relationships with people who are working together to generate wealth. Just click the link that is included in the show notes, and I hope to see you there.